My father went back to this Kastner camp together with my uncles, several of our main members of the family, and they fell into the third transport of Kastner. They were taken to Bergen-Belsen, but Hitler got to know about this deal, which very nearly meant the arrest of Himmler. He was outraged and stopped the deal. So my father got stuck in Bergen-Belsen, but the Germans kept them separately within the camp, a camp within the camp, and they were treated as hostages rather than ordinary inmates. And that's how they survived.
And that was the blood for goods agreement, I believe is what Eichmann called it.
That's right, that's right. And the payoff was quite complex. There were army trucks, gold, jewelry, textiles, all kinds of things.
Right. And then Kastner, of course, was executed in Israel, right? He was found guilty of being a collaborator, which is a whole other story, but yeah.
Well, yes, the chief accusation against him was that it was part of his deal that he was not to tell the Transylvanian Jews about their ultimate fate, because the transportations were accompanied with the most extreme lies that they were going to be agricultural workers supporting the German effort in Germany or something. And of course, that was total lies. But no, there is no conclusion about this charge, whether it was true or not. But it is known that Kastner had a very special relationship with the German leadership. For example, he didn't have to wear the yellow star.
Interesting. Right.
And he had free access to the Gestapo HQ and things like that. So it was.
But he did save lives, right? I mean, that's not in doubt.
He did. And even if my father wasn't part of this transportation, and I still wonder how they dared to go back and trust a Nazi deal. But if they didn't, the alternative was to go into the kind of work camps that were attached to the Hungarian army on the Eastern Front, special Jewish work camps or battalions, which were abused, discriminated against. They had to have yellow armbands, and they were mostly used for clearing minefields. And their survival rate was no better than 10%. So these were the choices, which in a way, I often feel it echoes the impossible decisions that the Gazans have to make sometimes, trusting the enemy's plea to move on into safe areas. Could you trust anything? What do you do with people who cannot be moved, etc.? Now, I just want to say that some of my family, after liberation, those who survived, one cousin, for example, a very young girl at that time, was spared because he was working in Auschwitz, sorting clothes, and somehow this helped to survive. But on one day, she had to sort her parents' clothes. So the trauma must have been absolutely awful.
Wow.
But what I found later, that some of these family members who ended up again in Romania, because Transylvania was reattached to Romania after the Second World War. And later on, Ceausescu had a deal with the Israeli authorities. He was virtually selling Jews so many $1,000s per head and allowing them to go. The only place they were allowed to leave, anybody from a communist country, with the permission of the authorities. So a branch of my family ended up in Israel, in Haifa. And when I was visiting them in the 60s, by that time I was in the UK, and because I came to the UK after the Hungarian uprising in 56. So when I visited them, I was completely shocked that those who survived the Holocaust, my aunt and my cousin, etc., were actually racist themselves. And this is when my eyes were opened about the impossible racism against the Palestinians. And when Jerusalem was still divided, so early days, and already the place felt like it was militarized and racist, basically.
And what did you think of Israel before then, like the founding of Israel? I mean, you were young, obviously, when it was founded, but how did your view of Israel change?
I was still a teenager when this happened. On Liberation 1945, I was 7 years old, going on 8. And very quickly, there was a Stalinist regime installed in all the Eastern European countries, as you know. And after a very brief period of controlled democracy, that didn't last long. And there was a complete lack of information about certain historic events, like the founding of Israel. We didn't know anything about it. And anyway, I was too young, so I had no knowledge or awareness. But the only thing I do remember is that my parents had to very seriously consider and only do very occasionally write to relatives in Israel, because any connection with a non-communist country was regarded as a potential, a dangerous thing to do, quite simply.
So you visited your family members. How did their racism manifest?
Not only theirs, of course, but generally.
Sure.
For example, right. I went on a conducted tour from Haifa to Jerusalem, and the guide, when we reached the dividing line, of the way he was talking about the other side, the Arabs on the other side, was disgusting, completely racist. Some members of my family converted to Christianity. There's two ways of doing it. One, just purely formally, because in 44, that very briefly, there could be certain advantages of being protected against some of the discriminating laws against Jews if you were a converted Christian. But that didn't last. That was only very temporary.
Okay.
And some people became Christians for that reason, but right. Others quite genuinely converted as a I don't know, became born again Christian. And several people in my family, particularly an aunt, for example, who later ended up in Haifa and kept it very quiet that she was Christian because the neighbors were not to know. But she was very genuine, you know, she was always studying the Bible, etc., and tried to convert me to Christianity without any success. And we were watching the news one day, and there was a Palestinian demonstration going on. Suddenly, helicopters appeared above them, and they were shooting. I don't know, I hope it was rubber bullets, but it might have been live ammunition, but it was shooting into the crowd. That completely shocking outside. And I expressed my horror to my aunt, and she said, "Well, what's the problem? They're Arabs, aren't they?" Professing
very Christian.
a genuine Christian.
Yeah.
And the same aunt would forbid me to buy anything in an Arab shop, for example, and things like that. But
so were you surprised by this, given that they had survived?
I was shocked rather than surprised. Well, surprised and shocked, because I thought it was a natural thing that if you go through an experience of acute danger, humiliation, and abuse, that you learn your lesson, that nobody should go through that ever again. That would be, to my mind, the natural attitude. And many people do have that attitude, many Jews, thank God. But, by the way, I'm not a believer.
Me neither. I'm Jewish, but not a believer also.
That was a rhetorical statement. But yes, I just thought it was totally against what you could expect.
Yeah.
And I was horrified by it.
And are you in touch with your relatives in Israel now?
Sadly, no, I'm not actually. Most of them by now died, unfortunately. Only have from this period of the Holocaust relatives, one or two in Hungary, in Budapest.
Mm-hmm. And did your Israeli relatives have kids who are Israeli? I mean, I guess not Israeli relatives, because they became Israeli, your relatives. Did they then have children
Yes,
in Israel?
right. I mean, I think this particular cousin I mentioned earlier, who came back from Auschwitz, very traumatized. She couldn't talk to her daughter about her experiences. She took part in some kind of organized recording in a kind of neutral way, but could not talk to her own family about it. Her daughter's children now in the IDF serving, and I don't have contact with them. I feel sorry for them.
How come?
They obviously brainwashed completely. Even my cousin was saying how, one day you'll be driven into the sea by the Arabs, and they absorb this continuous living on the edge of some terrible danger, and this justifies everything.
Right. And what do you say to that argument?
It's a kind of self-perpetuating belief. Since I became an active member of PSC, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, we have one honorary member in Palestine, Jaffa, who comes by Zoom, attends our meetings. And when I was visiting Israel, I had occasional casual contact with Palestinians, taxi drivers and the like. And since then, visitors from Palestine as well I met. Invariably, I find them not bitter, surprisingly not bitter, but reasonable, kind people. And this fear of being driven into the sea is artificially created, I reckon, to serve the purpose of the genocide, eventual genocide, and discrimination, and continuous Nakba that they never stop doing.